So I've been doing this now 10 years and it's taken me nearly that long to get the hang of silicone. So in this video, I'm going to be showing you how I figured out how to do it, some tips and tricks to get it really nice and smooth, and highlight some of the mistakes I was doing in the first place and why it wasn't working out as well as I'd like it to. Okay, so you will need silicone of your choice. This is sanitary silicone. If you're using it for the bathroom, make sure you use this stuff because it won't mold up quite so quick. This I'm using because it's got a better color match to this worktop. You'll need some wipes like this. I use the multi-use wipes. They're really good. You need this to wipe the silicone off your fingers, off your tools. So that needs to be something that's going to pull the silicone off. You don't want to be using that. Anyway, you're going to be applying it unless you want to remove it. You're going to be needing a squeezy bottle with some dish soap, so fairy liquid in mixed with some water. Just a little bit of, just enough to make it kind of foam up when you shake it. Silicone gun of your choice, a knife to cut the top of the silicone. You're going to need a cloth to wipe, and you're going to need some toilet paper or tissue paper in order to check for moisture content before you apply the silicone. All right, we've got all our stuff together. We're ready to start applying it, but first we're going to go over there and have a look at some theory. Okay, I'm hoping you can see that all right. Got a tile, another tile, and this is the gap here that you're going to want to fill with silicone. That's the silicone as you apply it. This is the soap spray. What you're going to do is apply the silicone, make sure it has good contact there and there. Now silicone sticks to everything. What the soap does is stops it sticking to things. So you've applied the silicone all the way along. You spray the soap on the surfaces of the silicone, down the tile, or the worktop, spray it on your finger, wipe it off, and your goal is to wipe off that section of silicone. So you're left with that bit, and that radius that you've created. The most important thing when you're applying this, and if you get this stage right, the rest will be easy, is making sure that this section and this section is covered from the start of your line to the end of your line. When you're using your trigger, you'll be pulling it, you'll run out of space, you'll have to release and reapply. Your silicone will come down like this, and then at the moment when you've released, there'll be a pause in the flow. If you don't make sure that's still stuck into the corner that you're trying to apply it to, and you sort of pull off a little bit, there'll be a gap just about here. When you spray the soap on, that will seep behind the silicone, and as you then run your finger along it, you'll pull that out. It won't stick. Or if you don't pull it out, it'll be there, but it still won't be stuck, so water will be able to get behind there. So if you get that stage right, the rest should go pretty smoothly. So the most important thing, get coverage from there to there, the whole way along the silicone line, spray it, wipe it off, and you should be good to go. Okay, so we're getting ready to apply. Get the gun. For this one, we're going to be using this silicone because this is, as I said before, the color matched one. You can cut this before putting it into the gun, but I just find that's how I like to do it. Get your knife, whip the end off. Yep. You want to try and catch that because if you don't, you'll walk on it, and then as you're walking around, you'll walk it all over the floor. Sometimes you're lucky and there's not actually any silicone on the end of there, but there is a little bit here. Screw your cap on. Make sure that's tight, otherwise when you squeeze the gun it will go splodge over there. And then cut this at about a 45-degree angle, about that far down the end. Looks good. You don't want any sort of sharp bits, or if you've messed the cut up and you have to do it twice and you get the jaggedy bits, just try and trim that off. Now, some people think the angle of this is really, really important, and it's not. Just get it wide enough that you can get some silicone out of there. If you want to change the angle, you can, as in if you want to change the quantity of silicone coming out of here, change the angle of the gun. So if you want barely any, make it flush like that. And that means that you'll be scraping it off as you draw that along. If you want a bit more, just make it a shallower angle and you'll have more out because the back of this won't be scraping quite so much off. That's ready. I've already wiped this, which is why I've cut this, but the stage you're going to want to do before that is probably give this a quick wipe. So get your rag, wipe it like so. Nice and clean. You don't want anything near it. So if it's a bit dusty on the areas around here, just give them a quick wipe off too. Make sure all your tools are nice and close to hand, because when this goes wrong, it goes wrong really quick. And you're going to want to get access to all your wipes and your knives and your silicone and your emergency kit just in case you have a disaster. Now this is a real world job. It's on one of the flats that we're selling, which means up at this end, we've got a nice tight gap as it should be. Up at this end, we've got a huge gap as it should not be. But this is the real world, and this is what you're probably going to be dealing with if you're doing it yourself as well. So it just shows that this is how we're going to be doing it. Big gap, small gap, same piece, same principles. You just got to make sure that you've got that coverage as we went over in the theory. Oh, and the tissue paper I mentioned. Right now, you probably can't see it, there's a slight bit of moisture on the surface. Get your toilet paper or a tissue, something like that. It has to be that light tissue that's going to absorb water really quick. And just run it along the edge, have a look at it, and if there's no clear water on there, the whole way along, and ensure you get that under the gap, because sometimes water pools under there. No water on that, then we're ready to go. Now what you want to be doing is starting from the corner which you're going to apply the second coat to. So if you imagine we're going to start, we're going to go along here, then we're going to start the second layer and go along here. The reason we're doing that is because once you've applied the first layer, and I've made a mistake before, you go and spray the soap across the top. If you imagine when you spray this end, that's going to overspray into this section. And if you haven't siliconed this section along here, you're going to find that when you think, okay, I finished this, I'll just start the second layer. You start the second layer and you will have already got soap there, which means this won't stick. So it'll all go to pot pretty quickly. So, and the other reason we're going to start in the corner is because when you've got both coats, you can smooth the corner itself nicely. If you've just got one layer there and let it dry, do another layer there, you're not going to be able to smooth it into a really nice corner. It'll end up being a little bit, there'll be a seam and it just won't look as good. Okay, so it's a bit nerve-wracking when you start. So as you can see, I've got it at about a 45-degree angle into the corner. We're going to squeeze, go along here, pause when we run out of trigger, squeeze, go along a little bit again. Doesn't matter how tidy the top is right now, all that matters is that we get the silicone covered along the seam. Okay, stop, run again, stop, run again, stop, run again, stop, run again, stop, run again. All right, I'm gonna have to move now. So when you move, just let the pressure settle a little bit, drag it out, take the gun away. Okay. So I'm gonna place this back in where I started. And as I said before, it doesn't matter how messy it is right now. So don't try and get this smooth, just try and get it in. So I'm gonna place it in the silicone instead of after it. Squeeze, continue running, continue running, continue. All right, I think I'm probably out of shot right now, but I'm gonna finish off the line. At the end, pausing, just lift it off. Okay, I'm gonna show you this first before I come around and do the other side so that you know how that looks. Okay, we're applying the second bit. As I said before, when you start again, it also helps just make sure the nozzle is nice and clean on the end of the silicone, because if you've got splodges everywhere, it can ruin it. The silicone dries a little bit. This one's okay. So I'm gonna put it in the corner first, then start applying, and then we're gonna be dragging. Stop, run out of trigger. Now you see there, I'm gonna pull this out so you can perhaps see what I've just done. But when the silicone ran out, that there hasn't contacted with the bottom. There's a gap, and perhaps you can see that, perhaps you can't, but there's a little bit of a recess. You can see it's not really pushed in. When you spray on there, that's the bit that's going to pull out. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to splodge it over the top of that just to make sure we've got a nice deep contact. Okay, so this is not going to be pretty, but before we apply the fairy liquid, we just want to make sure we've got this. So I'll put it back into the section, apply a bit more and just bring that out, and you can see now I've got good contact. Okay, so this bit you need to move reasonably fast. We've got the soap mix. I don't know why I give it a shake, feels like it mixes a bit more. Got good coverage, we've checked around, pretty happy with everything here. Get our wipes, get them to hand. You probably need a few, and the technique is to wipe it off with your finger and then wipe it off your finger onto one of these rags so that you have a nice clean hand to reapply. Pick your squidgiest finger, that one's mine, works pretty nicely. Far cheaper than any of those profiles you're going to get. Okay, one, put the other one to the side. Going to start in the corner as we did last time. I'm going to spray it now. Spray this side. You see it doesn't really matter what quantity you use, because all you're really doing is just covering the surface, so you can't really use too much. I mean, perhaps you could, but like I've just applied a fairly decent amount. Spray your finger so it doesn't stick to your finger. You see it's nice and soapy. I'm just going to wipe it along the edge and then wipe that off onto here. Okay, I'm going to start in the corner, work my way out, come back to the corner and work my way along there. Okay, right, see all that? That just wipes off super nice and easy on there. I've also wiped off fairy liquid, so let's put some more fairy liquid on my finger. Go back to where I finished. Got enough there. More fairy liquid on my finger. Wipe that off to there. I'll start back at this end. Pull that off. There we go. Wipe that along. Big bit there. Spray my finger. Wipe it along again. Stop before the end. And then I'm going to work my way from the end back, just because it gives you a better finish. Ooh. So a day's gone by, and the keen-eyed amongst you will have noticed there's a little bit of a line running through this section from here to here. Don't know whether that was a bit of grit that was stuck in the bead. Don't know whether it was something on my finger. It looks like it's probably just not quite enough silicone in there, which means it's split between this area and the gap, because there wasn't enough to cover inside there. So we're going to fix that, and we'll show you how we do it next. If you're going to use the silicone the day after, there's no need to put anything in the end or cap it off. It won't dry far enough down the nozzle for it to be any problem, and you can just pull the end off. This is dry, and then you've got a nice fresh clean edge there. It all sort of comes off with the dry bits. Now I've put a new nozzle on the end of this because I don't really want to be redoing the line at the top of here and at the bottom of there. I just want to put a piece in that crack to seal that up. I was considering just using this anyway, because whenever you use a new nozzle you waste that much silicone. I've only got one of these tubes, so I don't really want to waste any, but I think with that radius we're going to end up with a splodge. It's going to look a bit messy, so I've swapped it and we're going to use a narrower nozzle just for this bit. Just trying to get a tiny bead in that centre of that crack, so it's smaller than the original one, so we don't have any trouble with the outside edges. Benefit of using a smaller nozzle like this is I managed to get that whole run just then in one squeeze, so I didn't have to let off and let on again. And then from here it's exactly the same process as we did before. Got the coverage, there's no gaps. Sometimes bits like this look like they're a gap, but really they're a ridge, and it's not actually, it's stuck at the back, it's just lipped up, so that's okay. Give that a squeeze, my finger a squeeze, and just run this along here like this, pressing it into the crack. There you go. Good thing about using fairy liquid like this is you can kind of keep applying it. If there's a bit you're not so sure, and you can just massage it in like this, keep going, because it won't stick to anything the fairy liquid's got on, you can spend your time getting a really nice smooth line without it sticking to your fingers. Okay, there we go. I think that's as good as we're going to get it. And that sealed that crack. Okay, so to conclude, I've set this up and we're going to purposely mess this up and then try and fix it, just so that you can see that if it really does go terribly, you can usually pull it back. In addition to everything we've used before, something that helps is having these profiles. The reason the square ones are handy is because you can, well, I'll show you why they're handy in a minute. You'll see as we go through. So the first thing is going to be, you need all the same tools. Like, we're going to assume you've got all of those to hand. But let's say that your knife's not sharp and you've really butchered the end of, I mean, that's terrible. Wow, okay. I mean, there's chunks. You'd never cut it that bad, but let's just leave it like that and see how that goes. I'm going to apply a bead this side and we're going to try it with no masking tape, and then on the back I've put some masking tape on and we'll do a second example just so that you can see masking tape can help, but I don't think it's all as good as perhaps it's made out. There are even some products that you can buy that are especially for this that are a masking tape that you can apply for silicone, but I just think it's easier doing it this way. Okay, let's give this a shot. So what's going to go wrong? Let's say put a big splodge to start with, it goes all over the place. Let's say you've got a bit of a gap like that. Let's go like this. Let's say you sneeze and then we smear it over there. And you get a good bit, take your eye off the ball, get it, big splodge. Oh no, don't know what I'm doing. Okay, let's finish that bottom bit off like that. I don't know, you weren't paying attention. Okay, so you're going to want your profile, because what we're going to need to do is, you can see all the gaps and we've learned already that that's not going to work, and we've also splodged it all over the place. What we're going to need is to go back in with a silicone gun, fill in these gaps, and then, you know, look at the end of the silicone there, it's still got all the blobs on it. What I'm going to want to do, if I was doing it properly, is wipe that off, but we're not doing it properly. So go back in there. You see I'm kind of just making sure that, and I'm not really applying any more silicone, I'm just spreading out what's there. You see, it's not, now I'm going to apply some because it's not fitting in there. Okay, so now we have contact, as we went through in the theory, all the way along. Still super messy. What we don't want to do now is come along with this profile and make it way worse. I'm going to use the other one first. So there's different numbers on here, which is a different radius. I'm going to use the biggest one, which is 14 on this one, and then we're going to go down if we need to. The idea of this is we're going to be able to scrape all the excess off, and we don't want any of this silicone to go any further. So we're going to spray it as we've done in the past, and here, and we're going to spray the tool as well. This is our first stage, so we're going to use a 14. We've still got our wipe off cloth here. Okay, we're covered, we've sprayed. Now, this isn't going to remove all of it because the radius that we've applied is a big one. Okay, let's wipe that off. Has it made any better? Marginally. All right, we'll go down a radius on this to 12. Respray this fairy liquid. You have to apply some pressure, otherwise it's not going to want to come off. This is also the worst possible colour on the worst possible backdrop, because a dark blue with a white, you can see it really stands out. Okay, let's go down all the way to 10. I'm going to try and scrape as much of this off as we can. Okay, do we have anything usable? You're never going to get it looking perfect if you're trying to fix a problem like that. We're just trying to get it looking good enough. Okay, let's just demonstrate how you can take this off. So I'm just chamfering it off like this. This is a wood grain piece of kitchen, which means that there's silicone in there, like in the grain. It's going to be Well, you're not going to be able to remove it with this, so I'll show you how to do that in a minute. How's it look? Terrible. Okay, let's go down further. I'm going to go down to 6, I think. Right. I mean, I suppose it could have just started with a 6, but the problem is, as it all builds up on here, it ends up splurging more up and down the bottom, so you can end up making more of a mess if you try and take too much off. You probably didn't need to go down quite as carefully as I did, but we were starting with a really terrible first start. Going back down to the 6, because I think that's the right kind of radius for what we're trying to achieve here. One final pass. Okay, so we've got that. That's us finished with the radius. The way I like to finish it off is just finish with your finger. I use my little finger this time because it's a tiny radius, and that just helps you smooth out the bead of silicone like that. On the ends, I'll just wrap it around a little bit there. Okay, so the bead of silicone, we've got a contact all the way along. It's nice and small, it's nice and even, but you can see it's still in the wood grain. We'll be able to sort this out now. We won't be able to sort this one out until it's fully dry. So I'm gonna get, in fact, I'm gonna probably use this same one we're using here. This is how I work this. So you just roll it up, or I fold it, and then you can continue using the bottom or the back. But this magic wipe here, in fact, I'm gonna roll it all wet, so I'm just gonna wipe this. You can just sort of rub into the grain like this. And that will remove the silicone from inside the grain. I mean, you could try and work your way down here, but now that's looking good, you do not touch, don't touch it. Wait till it's dry, come back along with one of these, and then give it a wipe later on. The closer you get to it, the higher risk you're gonna catch silicone. And once it's dry, it's a lot more robust than when it's just been applied. But I mean, that's probably as good as you're gonna get it from that mess. I'll turn this over and we'll have a go with the masking tape. Okay, so I've spun it round. This is an example of what I do with this. We've got a load of silicone up there, so let's just fold it, and then we can use the back side. Don't think we're gonna need the profiles here. I've cut the end off of the silicone because we're not demonstrating a bad job, we're just demonstrating how masking tape works. Also, there's a little bit of leakage at the back here with the soap, so that's gonna stop it sticking, but we're just trying to get this done, so let's go. Run out of the trigger, see that gap? Just gonna run back, put a little bit more in there. Okay, now we're at the end. Should mention when you're at the end, just use the release pressure bit there, and that stops it coming out. If you just let go, it's gonna continue coming out the end. So just get to the end, press the trigger, hold until it stops coming out, and then you can stop. Okay, so I'm not going to spray any of this on here because the masking tape supposedly replaces the fairy liquid. Perhaps you could use it. I've just not really got on with this. So I'm going to spray my finger because I don't want it to stick to my finger. And I'm going to squeeze it like that. And I'm doing this badly almost on purpose, but can you see that's what's going to happen if you don't use fairy liquid? It just squeezes all over the place. It shouldn't stick to my finger because I've just used the fairy liquid, but I suppose now the idea is you just peel this off like that, and the bottom like that. You could go over it with your finger another couple of times to smooth it out. Now this masking tape is going to stick to absolutely everything, so make sure you keep that somewhere aside. And it looks brilliant because it's got a lovely straight line across the top and a lovely straight line across the bottom. But what I tend to find is when you use the masking tape, you get this little lip. What you've essentially done is cut, when you're removing the masking tape, you've cut a line across here and a line across here. Now you've got this ridge. It's not showing up too badly on here because we wiped it all right in the first place, but I don't really like the way it ends up like that. Plus, you've got to spend all the extra time doing the masking tape and you could be going forever doing it. So that's how you would do it with masking tape. Perhaps you could refine the technique. It does look neat from distance, but when you look in close, there's a ridge, and there's a ridge along the bottom. It should be watertight, so after looking at this job, it actually feels okay. Perhaps I'll start using masking tape a bit more, but personally, I prefer using finger on the other side. It's just a bit quicker. So I hope you found that helpful. I'd say that if I'd watched this video back in the beginning when I was having trouble, that I wouldn't have had trouble and I would have got the hang a lot quicker. But I did watch videos on YouTube and I didn't get the hang of it. So I hope you learned something. Hope you learned something from this. The channel from now on is going to be changing a little. We've purchased 50 acres in the Highlands of Scotland and we're going to be filming that as we go. We're going to be doing passive house, we're going to be doing hydropower, solar power. It's completely off-grid. We're going to be reforesting the side of a hill that we've also got. There's waterfalls, there's all sorts. So it's going to be very pretty videos, but it's going to be slightly different from this. So if you like that kind of content, subscribe and we'll see you in the next one.